geopolitical instability is on the rise in many parts of the world, and the consequences for all of our audiences are enormous.
Media plurality at risk. The end of USAGM funding puts global media diversity in jeopardy. Millions risk losing access to free, independent information.
It's a dramatic situation and a backslash for free media worldwide. I think it's getting more difficult to reach people.
We have got to survive. If we don't, it is a huge gift to Russia and China and all of those who would like to plunge the world into darkness.
How can we protect information, education and media diversity independently? How can foreign broadcasters reposition themselves to become more financially independent? Breaking barriers, building bridges, rethinking global access to information. Together we see. Let's dive into the discussion, ensuring continued access to information, how to build bridges in volatile times.
Great panel to discuss this today. Some of them you've seen in our little introductory movie. One of them is Steve Kappas, who's here with us today. Steve, where are you? Over there. Just everybody make their way up here. Steve, of course, is the CEO and president of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberator. Difficult times.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Just take a seat over there, please. Also, from our little movie is Jonathan Munro, who is here as well from the BBC. He is the global director of BBC News, one of the strongest brands in the international market. Just take a seat here, if you will. And of course, we have our Director General, our very own Peter Limbourg, who has chosen to spend his birthday on this panel today. He's also my boss. Right, Peter? Just here in the middle, right? Not in the movie, but of course, equally important are two more panelists we have today. That's Hamadou Tidiane Sy, who's with us from Senegal today. Hamadou, over there, coming our way. Very experienced journalist, has been with many different outlets in the past, but he is now the CEO and the founder of E-jicom, which is a media training school in Dakar. So ground zero for all the people working later in the business. Please take a seat. And last but not least, of course, we have Mikhail Broniatowski, who, coming our way from over there, has been a journalist for 46 years. And it'd take probably too long to give you all the functions that he's had in the past, but right now he is, I'm always getting it mixed up with President, CEO, or Global Director, but I have it right here. So the Director of TVP World, giving us an Eastern European perspective. Thank you very much for being here, Mikhail. Okay. Just wanted to mention something before we get started. You notice this is an all-male panel. This is not by design. Sometimes it's just, people cancel, people say, okay, we're going to come to the panel. And with something as big, two-day global media forum, this is sometimes what you end up with. That's not saying it's a bad panel, okay? It's a very good panel, but we also have a couple of all-female panels, so over the course of the 2 days, it balances out nicely. I just wanted to say that.
You were introduced by a woman, no problem.
And from that, back to our topic, Steve. I mean, we're all kind of feeling the flame at the moment, but you're like in the middle of the fire with what's happening in the US. If the US administration had its way, you and your people would be gone. You wouldn't be doing the same thing anymore. Are you surprised sometimes that you still have a job?
Well, no, I'm not surprised I still have a job. I feel like with this role comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty has been around for 75 years as of last week. I came into it with my eyes wide open about the challenges that we would be facing. I will say, I did not anticipate the degree to which our survival would be threatened, but here we are. And I would basically say very simply, we need to survive this fight. There are many challenges that we're facing. I feel like we're kind of in the center of a Venn diagram of all kinds of forces that are pushing against us, that would like to see us silenced, that would like to see our journalists just simply disappear. We're operating in some of the most difficult terrain on the globe, and our people are doing brilliant work. They're doing enterprise reporting, investigative reporting, frontline war reporting, and they're doing it in places where autocrats and others would like us to just simply vanish. I think if that happens, it's a disaster. It's a huge gift, as I said in the video, to Russia and to China and to Iran. The forces that are being used against us right now are things that we all are going to have to grapple with. What is our source of funding long term? Right now, we're in a situation where our funding is in jeopardy every month, and it's been that way for much of this year. We intend to survive. We intend to figure out ways of diversifying our funding, and we intend to not yield any ground. We heard Commissioner Koss earlier today talk about the importance of covering things that are happening right now in Moldova, right now in Ukraine, right now in the Balkans. Those are places where we have journalists working as we speak. That's what we do. It's the power of local journalism. And we've made the commitment to our audiences to keep going in those areas. And so little did we expect that some of the same tactics being used by places like Russia would be used, in fact, by the US agency that has the responsibility for Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Asia and Middle East Broadcasting, Voice of America, Cuban Broadcasting, and the Open Technology Fund, to the points just made in that last panel. Little did we expect that we would be facing restrictions from the US agency that has the responsibility to keep our people safe.
Protected.
Yeah, but here we are, and we intend to win this fight.
Peter, are you surprised how quickly things can unravel if the wrong government or a government that doesn't share the same values as have been shared in the last 70, 80 years comes into power?
I mean, we all were surprised is a very modest word. I mean, we were shocked because what we saw was that what we might think the Russians and the Chinese, they dream of to silence Radio Free Europe, the own government is doing it. And yes, you can say maybe they're not smart enough to make the right decision, but it's not only being a decision made which is not smart, it's absolutely against all the interests of the United States of America. This is what really is astonishing for us, and I think we are in solidarity with the colleagues. And I mean, it's not only a international media; it's an international media which is in places where where the others are not sometimes. I mean, the BBC is not everywhere, France Média Monde is not everywhere, we are not everywhere. And there are more than, I think, 20 languages which USAGM worldwide and RFE in particular is broadcasting in. And now there is, in most of them, there is silence or, I presume, a reduced offer, because you cannot withhold with the same quality and with the same amount of news if money is lacking. So yeah, we were shocked, and I can only hope that this journalism can continue. However, we will go there, but I think it's important.
You mentioned solidarity. What can solidarity look like? Now, the EU has, I think, funded Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, 5.5 million euros emergency funding. Is that what it should look like?
I don't have the right answer for this, or the miracle. I mean, first of all, I think one has to try to convince the US government to say that they are doing a really big mistake. And so the answer is not lying here. The answer is in Washington. It's their business. It's their operation. It's journalists who relied for decades on them, and so I think they have to find the solution. But yes, solidarity is also something that we highlight the problem, and that we take care that these things do not happen in silence. And so I think it's a good chance to show solidarity talking about this at a global media forum on a prominent hour at a great stage with a wonderful audience. So I think this is what we can do, but we cannot now find the miracle solution.
Mikhail, you've experienced, I assume, the value of broadcasters like RFI and Radio Liberty behind the Iron Curtain.
Well, it was not Radio Liberty. In Poland, it was Radio Wolna Europa, which means Radio for Europe. And it was, we are talking about defending democracy, fighting for free speech. And during my my youth and until the end of the 80s, I didn't understand this as fight for democracy or defense of free speech. This was Radio for Europe for us in Poland and in all other Soviet bloc countries was like oxygen. It was fresh air, and first of all, it was just information. You needed this radio in order to get proper news, real news, facts. Without that, we would be in darkness.
Do people still feel like that?
Not in Poland, because in Poland it's not a problem anymore. However, our colleagues from BBC think that we are in need of free speech. So they started the program in Polish language. But for countries like Russia, all the post-Soviet republics, and Belarus as well, the need for information is the same as it was 30, 40 years ago, because they are victims of dictatures which are prevailing in their countries, and I hope not, but still disappearance of Radio for Europe / Radio Liberty would mean a part of being harmful for American soft power. It would be disastrous for countries of this region, because without that they will be suffering from this stupid propaganda war. Luckily, we are doing, as we sit here, several organizations in Europe, public organizations, media broadcasters are doing a lot of efforts to fill a possible gap. But I hope we in Poland won't be filling the gap. We will be joining Radio for Europe, Radio Liberty, or Radio Svoboda in enlightening these societies.
I think we're going to hear that, filling the void, filling the gap. We heard a lot about that. We're still going to hear a lot about that, because what happens if, international broadcasters like the ones that are represented here don't fill the void? And my suspicion, Tidiane, is that you can say a few things about that from your perspective in Senegal, especially when it comes to the Chinese. I know, in many African countries have their quarrels with Western media, but surely it's preferable to what the Chinese are doing, right?
From my perspective, allow me to bring it at a more local level. I mean, what's happening in the world. I mean, the issue we're all facing is the issue of independent journalism, the existence of independent journalism. Because, I mean, if you go to places like Burkina Faso or Mali today, they have serious issues with the Western media itself. And there's a whole discourse against the Western media. And that discourse probably has got radicalized in some countries, but it has always been there because of the narratives, how the Africans and the African continent was represented in the Western media. So it has sort of given the space for all those newcomers to come. And what is difficult is you find yourself in between geopolitical fights. That's how, if you want to look at it from an independent perspective, that's what we see. Africa being a battleground. Now, to talk about the American issue, for that one, some independent news outlets might be affected. As you may know, independent media being extremely difficult to fund, there were some US philanthropies or US organizations that were supporting independent media. If I speak, you introduced me as the head of a journalism school. If I speak with my other head as the founder of ouestaf News, we've been a little bit shaken. Currently, we are in a time of uncertainty because of, we used to get some sort of funding grants from the National Endowment for Democracy. And the whole American funding system is being shaken by what's happening in the US. So you add that to the restrictions that you have. For instance, who knows what's happening in Burkina Faso today? Several journalists are in exile. I was talking with a few colleagues who are in exile. In the country, some journalists are being arrested or being forced to join the military as a form of punishment. So I think in Africa, the issue is more the space being restricted with autocratic rulers. I mean, we have 4 countries that are under military rule, where the nationalistic discourse, I don't know if I say nationalistic, if it would work in Germany, but where the sovereignty issue is put at the front. You hope to countries like Senegal, which was supposed to be a free country where people think, well, you are enjoying freedom of the press. As we speak, the government is fighting against the media. So
you're putting it into context of the broader conflict, but where do you see the bridges? You know, what should be done in this very difficult situation for a lot of local media, but also the international media? Basically putting it in the context of disinformation, misinformation, bad actors coming in with wrong information, people not being able to make their own decisions based on facts.
Collaboration to make the news come out first. Where do you get the news? For instance, we have some sort of partnership with some Malian media. I don't know, I'm not sure if I would tell it. So that if they have news that they cannot broadcast, we try to broadcast it from Senegal. Probably we can look at that at a broader level. But for me also, my other take is, as journalists, a global community of journalists, we need to think, if people in the climate movement are saying, okay, climate every day. Those in the human rights field are saying freedom for everyone. We probably need also to have a global movement where we mobilize citizens to explain to them why they need independent media, why they need independent information, why they need reliable information. I think, I don't know if I have the solution to that, but from what I see is we need people who can take that up front and put it on the agenda, on the global agenda.
So media literacy and educational measures, something you are doing down there?
Beyond that, because journalists are taught not to be advocates. We don't do advocacy. And I think now it's playing against us, because we need people to do advocacy for good journalism globally.
That's a good point, you know. Advocacy. Jonathan, we're not all the same, of course, Deutsche Welle, BBC, but, you know, we kind of think we're the good guys. We're on the right side here. And are we all bringing a knife to a gunfight when it comes to the Russians and the Chinese?
No, I don't think so. But I think the big picture here, Max, is that the battle for truth is on. And that's not going to be fought and won or lost in a defined period of time. It's on now, and it will continue to be a battle in the long run for the rest of all of our careers. And everyone in this room and everyone on this panel has a role to play in fighting that battle. Because if the bad guys get the upper hand, so to speak, then the significant effects of that for the human race, frankly, are really unthinkable. And the reason it's on now in a more acute way than before is because certain state actors, I'm thinking particularly of the Chinese and Russians, are pouring billions and billions of dollars, pounds, euros, whatever, into their global media strategy, and they're using that to put around the world what we would have previously called propaganda. We now have other words for it, misinformation and disinformation, but the fact is it's not the truth. And whilst people in communities around the world are absorbing all of that, often on their smartphones, invisibly at home, their trust in that is growing, because the presence of that media in their lives itself generates trust. That is a really worrying background against which organizations like the ones on this panel and many people from organizations in this room, we have got a different scale of job to do. So I don't think it's about knives in a gunfight or equipping ourselves with the wrong weapons. We've got to double down on what we do. What we do is spread things which we believe are true. We make mistakes, of course. Sometimes we put things out there that turn out not to be true, and the honest thing to do is then to be transparent about that. But doubling down on the mission requires journalistic will, and it also requires political will from governments who, like the government here or the government in the UK, and I hope in future the government in the US, realise that the battle for truth affects the outcomes of things like democratic elections. It affects the outcomes of stability in parts of the world that are vulnerable to instability. And unless we put the truth into those markets, the consequences are really, really dire.
It's always just going to be a fraction of what's out there, information-wise. So what's the solution of actually getting that information to the people?
There's a lot of truth in that, and you can't stop other people also pushing information, disinformation, propaganda into people's lives, into their streams. But what you can do is ensure that audiences know that when they come to certain types of journalism, they are getting impartial, fair, free reporting. And that is a very, very important badge of honour for organisations like those on this panel and others. If we lose that and we are seen to be swamped by the bad actors, we're going to find ourselves on the wrong side of history.
I would like to involve you a bit. I prepared a question. So maybe you can just, you're going to see a QR code if everything works up here on the screen. The question is, what needs to happen for international public media organizations to remain relevant? Because we are talking about relevance, right? Trust, relevance, all these things. Just type in one word where you think this would be important, or that is one of the main things you think needs to happen, keywords, and then we'll get the result for that later on. I hope it'll be bigger because I can't read it like this. In the meantime, Peter, you mentioned earlier that you are in favor of regulating the big tech giants, to some extent, at least. At least that's what I heard from your speech earlier. Could you elaborate a bit on that, in the context of this panel? What needs to happen there to get the brands out there, to trustworthy brands, free information, facts?
Well, I think you need the regulation because big tech acts like media houses. I mean, there is no difference. They offer content, mostly content they haven't produced themselves and they haven't paid for. So I think it's vital for the journalists all around the world who live from private journalism. I mean, we are here, most of us, getting well funded, or not enough, but well, we get money from our governments or parliaments, with one exception, yes. But this is something where we can be working properly. But most of the journalists around the globe work for private companies, and when big tech is taking the money, which is necessary to have these enterprises running, then private journalism will be reduced. And this is, I think, a big danger for us. So I think regulation is vital. The DSA here in Europe is a very important step. But my fear is also that European governments might get into this, let's say, bad deal. Okay, you can sell your cars in the US, but then stop regulating our big tech companies. And this is, I think, something which we have to be looking into, because it might be coming sooner than we think. And I would really hope that regulation continues, because if you look at TikTok, if you look at other platforms, they're very dodgy now, and I think it's important that we don't let these people who are organizing against our interests, our democracy, let them continue like this. So I think we need European answers, and then hopefully one day global answers, because as I said, European perspectives are not enough. I mean, we are here in Europe, we have our perspectives, fine enough, but around the globe they have much other experiences, and we should listen to these.
Yeah, speaking of other experiences, Steve, I want to come back to you there. When it comes to regulation, often the European Union and the US have very different takes on what should happen or not. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I mean, look, I can't tell you that the absolute business model for how we go forward, it looks like just like this. I can tell you that, you know, Jonathan talked about the political will to continue to be a strong presence in this age of information warfare. And he's absolutely right to characterize it as that there is a battle for the truth right now. Yes, the administration has taken some very strong actions against us, but I can also tell you that elsewhere in Washington, especially in Congress and elsewhere, there is bipartisan support to continue to keep this mission going, and we do need to continue to cultivate that, advocate on our own behalf, tell our story better, frankly. Hours after they froze our funding, back in March, we received a tremendous amount of outpouring of support and expressions of political will to see this great organization continue. Some of the loudest voices and some of the most prominent voices are from the corridors of power in Brussels, and from EU nations, from directors of organizations like Deutsche Welle. Peter came out with a very strong position in support of Radio Free Europe. And I think all of us see what's going on here now. I think if I were to answer this, I would say, like, we need to take this cohesive, we need to have a cohesive strategy with the collective talents and the collective creativity and the collective determination in order to continue to view this as a fight that cannot be lost, and in one in which we are not competitors. In fact, we all have a common interest. Our families have this at stake. We can't lose this because we simply don't want to see an organization go away. What's at stake are the fundamental freedoms of free societies. And we've got to continue to fight in corridors of power. We've got to continue to stay strong as a collective group of people who want to see this succeed. And it has to work. We've got to prevail. It's exhausting, I will tell you that, but it's no time to let up, because the forces on the other side are absolutely determined to win.
Hearing a lot, we need a strategy, we need to build the bridges. Mikhail, what could that look like concretely?
Well, simply do your job. TV stations, big media, and especially public media, which don't have to think first about business and then about their work in providing a proper view of the world, or the news, simply. So media like Deutsche Welle or BBC or TVP, Polish television, of which part is designed as for broadcasting to the east, because I'm heading the part of Polish television which is called TVP World Services. One part is TVP World in English, which is a sort of building soft power of Poland in the West and showing the situation in the region, mainly war. But on the other hand, we just, at the beginning of March, we started 3 independent channels. One is Bielsat in Belarusian, another one is Vodtak in Russian, and our absolutely newborn child, which is Slava TV in Ukrainian. So this is how we see in Poland this role of presenting.
But you're doing that on your own.
Yes.
Okay.
I would be more than happy to cooperate with others in the European Union, but when the cooperation comes, I'll be very happy. But so far, we are doing our job.
And what's hindering you to cooperate?
Nothing.
To build those bridges.
Nothing. We just started in March, so.
Yeah, well, that went a lot of thinking into that beforehand,
while we were
right?
planning for this for this platform, we never realized that there will be such a situation like we are discussing today. Who could imagine? Who could have imagined that suddenly Radio Svoboda would disappear? Luckily, if it really disappears, I hope not. We will be in place together with other colleagues from Europe, but I hope it doesn't disappear, and we will be cooperating both with them and with Deutsche Welle, with France Internationale and BBC.
I'm not sure how we do that with the results. Are they just going to appear at some point? This would be a good moment, but we can also just wait for later. So I'm just going to come back to that when it appears on the screen. All right. Tidiane, we talked a bit about media literacy. We talked about relevance, which is essential because with all the money in the world that you have, and if you do stuff that people don't deem relevant or don't trust or don't even see, then that's not going to help. What do you think, because you're among international public media organizations here, what do you think needs to happen for them to be increasingly relevant in Senegal, in the markets you observe?
Interestingly enough, I worked for the BBC in another life. Agence France Presse, those big media houses, Bloomberg, France 24, all of them. I think to be relevant, and if I take a stand and put myself as a citizen, an African citizen, or a citizen from the global south, I think being fair to the global south, to those audiences you speak to, would be something great. People think these media organizations are not fair. Is it true? Isn't it? Is it false? I can't tell. But I believe trying to speak, to be closer to the audiences, to reflect more reality. It's not an issue of having African reporters or African presenters. It's in terms of content. I think people believe that in these organizations, it is too Euro-centered. You can't blame someone being in Europe, being funded by European money, not to be Eurocentric. But if you want to be relevant to the audiences in the global south, you need to listen to the audiences in the global south. You need to know what are they interested in, how do they want to be depicted. Why this discourse from the Chinese, Russians is taking root is because people believe for long they have been misportrayed. For too long they have been used. So I think the relevance of your organizations might come in trying to see how to get closer, how to be fairer to these audiences, and this I'm talking more as a consumer, as like from what I'm hearing from other fellow citizens in Africa, in the global south. That's how I would put it.
I saw you nodding, Jonathan. I saw you nodding to what he said, and I know we talked earlier about also the difficulty of reaching, news fatigue, reaching children, reaching women in certain regions.
I think the relevance point is absolutely right, and putting news or information out to audiences that don't feel that it's relevant to them is not going to help anybody in this battle. So being relevant is key, and we're trying to innovate all the time in the way that we do that. We're looking at the moment, for example, at whether in your part of the world, should we move into the Wolof language, the big spoken language in Senegal and elsewhere in West Africa. We don't currently operate in that language. That would be an innovation for us, and it would be relevant to an audience we're not currently reaching. There's another word, I think, as well as relevance, which ties together quite a few of these points. And it goes to Steve's point about the exhaustion of fighting this battle. We as an industry have got to be incredibly resilient. And resilience is something that actually feels like it's part of the heart, but actually it also requires funds to get behind resilient actions. And it takes you back to the decision-making of governments. So when we, for example, we were nearly closed down in India because of technical issues around the law. It was basically an attack on free journalism. We had to rebuild our structures in India as an act of resilience, and we're still in business in India. There are lots of parts of the world where journalists from organizations like ours are not just not welcome, it is positively hostile to work in those environments. And resilience requires digging deep. When we're kicked out of Russia for our Russian language service and we set up a newsroom in Riga to carry on servicing audiences in Russian, that's an act of resilience, but it's also costly. So for governments around the world who want us to win this battle, and I believe most governments in most developed countries do want us to win this battle, they have to recognize that requires resource behind the resilience. It's not simply an act of spirit or an act of the heart by journalists.
Yeah, absolutely right, Jonathan. And if you compare the costs for one tank, which you have when you buy a Leopard 2 tank, about 25 million, I think in a modest way. So invest in free media, independent media, I think could be much, much more effective. And as you said, we are in a war, in an information war. And so I think it's something which governments should know. I hope they all understand it, because it's vital, and they shouldn't miss this chance. And what you said about relevance, I think absolutely clear, and it's understandable why audiences in Africa say maybe they too far away, or they have their own agenda. What we do is, first of all, we regionalize, which is a word that we go into the regions and be present and be in dialogue. But I think the best thing you can do, is what we've also been doing, is cooperation, co-production. So have, for instance, African media produced together with us. Our one example, Eco Africa, which is an environmental program, is produced now in Nigeria and in Zambia and in Berlin. So we three together produce it, and I think it's a very African magazine. It's not a pure European. It's a global magazine, and I think this is something which then helps to also convince our audiences that we are into dialogue, and we are not going there with a colonial attitude and say, okay, you have to think this or that. We hope to be in dialogue with them, and that's what we're doing with co-production.
I would like to have two quick rounds before we wrap it up, because I think we can do another 5 minutes because we started late. I hope so, at least. So we have some results up there that I can now read. Thank you very much. And a lot of it revolves around remain independent, censorship, I assume, not be censored, youth engagement. And a lot of it revolves around, money, innovation, and also have high quality productions with artificial intelligence and all that. And I would like to boil all of this, sorry if I'm being too simplistic here, but like to boil it down to innovation, right? So we're gonna have one round, everybody said short, yeah? How do we need to innovate, Jonathan, to remain relevant?
We need to meet audiences where they are, not expect them to come to us all the time. And that means being on platforms that weren't part of our working practices a number of years ago, but always, always, always with the quality of independent, robust journalism that we would expect on traditional linear media too.
Well, I would agree with that, and I also think a great example of it is what we saw in the last panel. You know, we need to invest in circumvention tools. We need to continue to be able to reach people. 3 weeks ago or so in Iran, the internet was shut down. Radio Farda is one of our largest services with one of the most successful reaches of reaching young people inside Iran who are restless, who are concerned about their futures. We've been reaching them through things like Instagram and podcasts. And so when the internet gets shut down, it becomes more challenging to distribute it. We used to have a safety net, which was provided by USAGM, with feeds that will allow us to continue. Those contracts were cut back in March and April for no good reason, but those are the types of things we're up against.
Everything I would underline. Yes, I would add invest in going into more regions, being present there, having more offices, bureaus, and also invest in artificial intelligence, because this can produce better journalism for effective costs. And I think as we are tax funded, we also have to always think about it, and we shouldn't miss this train. But as I said, in a European regulation. So.
Well, I mean, innovation is a bit difficult because people tend to think of technology,
Right.
but probably just changing the editorial approaches. I mean, I don't think I can put it in one word in 2 minutes or 1 minute, but I believe the way the editorial content is defined, is designed, probably there's a little niche there. I mean, I'm talking from, as I said, from the perspective of an African who lives in Africa, and not from the perspective of you guys sitting here and doing your news. I believe there's something to be found there. How to find it, how to define it may be a more difficult exercise, but it's probably where you need to look for areas of innovation.
From my point of view, we have no problem in recording, in producing our programs, mainly news, because we have professional studios. We don't have also, which is the most important thing, we don't have problem with staff, because our staff are refugees from Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, people with many years of experience, professionals. But my main problem is distribution, reach on the side of our audience, and so we are looking for every possible new way of distribution. So all social media, of course, satellite. We are trying and doing our best to be present and reachable, available for people who want to know.
So I'm a little surprised that editorial approach has such a weight here. I think it's great, but obviously also artificial intelligence, technology, distribution. Now for the last round, really quick, okay? You got to start this time.
Okay.
Imagine you have the US president sitting there, and you can tell him something about our topic, and he can't answer. What are you going to tell him?
Mr. President, informing better the societies of this part of the world will only help you, because America was always a symbol of freedom for our part of the world. And if you switch off this light, it will be you who will suffer, Americans, not Europeans, because Europeans will take over from you.
I'll just tell him that you're making it easy.
he's
still
there.
sitting there. You're making it easy for autocratic and military regimes to have arguments against free press and freedom of and independent journalism.
I think he should listen to his ambassadors, what they say when they report about the significance of free media in autocracies, and maybe that will help. But I think one has to have special approaches if one wants to reach Donald Trump's. So, well, but that's what I would try to do. But Steve has probably...
He's more experienced.
Okay,
huh?
no, go, Steve.
He's been thinking about that for a while, Steve.
Well, I would say to Mr. President that organizations like ours illuminate, they can inspire, we can educate, and frankly, we can help him to communicate with the world about what America's strategies, what America's priorities are, indeed what the free world wants to see in the globe. I would also say that the answer is not to have propaganda to battle propaganda. The truth is what matters, as Jonathan said earlier. I think it's absolutely critical that we continue to have organizations that are committed to the truth, that are independent, and those are the best representatives of free societies, and it's worth investing in.
I slightly worry that Steve should have had the last word on this question, but given that we're in the order we're in, I think I would say to him, the battle for truth is on. If he would join us in fighting the battle for truth, he could be the most powerful advocate for free and fair information the world has ever seen.
Thank you very much for joining our panel today. Pleasure having you.